Hello. I was trying to do my entry, but I like kept missing the unmute button just by like a little bit at a time. That was interesting. I'm back for all intents and purposes. I took a little bit of a technically I only took like a couple days because I did have that collab on Wednesday, but that wasn't on my channel, so it's been a while since I last was like on my own channel, but now I'm back. Now I'm here. I guess I had a good Thanksgiving this past Wednesday. I hope anyone else ended up having the same sort of experience. But let me take a sip. I do have my tea mix. I ended up making some more of the lemon and the ginger. I made it with green tea again. And I have my honey again, so it seems like for all intents and purposes everything's like kind of back in order. We did have a new follow in the time between when I was last live and now. Reverie, welcome. I think I'm pretty sure Prim raided her after our collab was over, and she kind of like remembered that I was here, and I guess she like came by to like do a little favor, which is always appreciated. I should probably set that down now. But yeah, I kinda... So the situation at hand right now is that we have 6 chapters left. The one I'm about to read, and then like 5 more. Because I'm on chapter 9 right now, just starting chapter 9, and there's 14 chapters in total, so I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read like 3 chapters for each stream, so we can get it to 4 parts and have it be mostly even. But I'm gonna try to read these slower so it like evens out and we get to be about the same amount of time. I don't know why my voice is so scratchy right now. I wasn't even talking much today, which is unusual for me, because a lot of the time, even when I'm like just by myself and there's nothing to like talk about to anybody, a lot of times I still talk to myself. But I've been pretty quiet today. Let me take another sip. Yeah, this stuff's good. Although this time I did end up using more lemon than ginger, so I think I might just have to like get some more ginger to like even things out. But I guess for all intents and purposes we should probably just get started. I'm a little bit sniffly because it's just like allergy season, I guess. I'm always kind of sniffly in the winter time. It's you know. But yeah, I guess without further ado, we can just get right into it. let me take a sip of water to like lubricate my throat meat, you know. Okay, I feel like I'm ready now. The Sentinels saw them. Oh jeez. Oh, that scared me. What the hell does that say? Oh, I'm trying not to laugh too loud. Wow, what a name. Sucking Tom Cruise's toes. Thank you very much for the follow. Much appreciated. The streaming experience in a nutshell. All right. Now for realsies, we gotta get the show on the road. The Sentinels saw them coming a little before sunset when the sea was flat and blinding. The sentinels were pacing the second tallest of many wry towers that sprouted up from the castle, and made it resemble one of those old, odd trees that grow with their roots in the air. From where they stood, the two men could survey the entire valley of Hagsgate, as far as the town and the sharp hills beyond, as well as the road that ran from the rim of the valley to the great, though sagging, front gate of King Haggard's castle. "A man and two women," said the first sentinel. He hurried to the far side of the tower, a stomach-startling motion, since the tower tilted so that half of the sentinel's sky was sea. The castle sat on the edge of a cliff, which dropped like a knife blade to a thin yellow shore, fraying bare over green and black rocks. Soft, baggy birds squatted on the rocks, snickering, "Said so, said so." The second man followed his comrade across the river at an easier pace. He said, "A man and a woman, the third one in the cloak. I am not certain of the third." Both men were clad in homemade mail, rings, bottle caps, and links of chains sewn into half-cured hides, and their faces were invisible behind rusted visors. But the second sentinel's voice and gait alike marked him as the elder. "The one in the black cloak," he said again. "Do not be too sure of that one too soon." But the first sentinel leaned out into the orange glare of the tipped-up sea, scraping a few studs loose from his poor armor on the parapet. "It is a woman," he declared. "I would doubt my own sex before hers." "And well you may," the other observed sardonically, "since you do nothing that becomes a man but ride astraddle. I warn you again, be slow to call that third male or female. Wait a little and see what you see." The first sentinel answered him without turning. "If I had grown up never dreaming that there were two separate secrets to the world, if I had taken every woman I met to be exactly like myself, still I would know that this creature was different from anything I had ever seen before. I have always been sorry that I have never pleased you, but now, when I look at her, I am sorry that I have never pleased myself." Is that like a joke? Is that like a lewd joke? Very interesting. He bent still further over the wall, straining his eyes towards the three slow figures on the road. A chuckle clattered behind his visor. "The other woman looks sore-footed and bad-tempered," he reported. "The man appears an amiable sort, though plainly of the strolling life. A minstrel like enough, or a player." He said nothing more for a long while, watching them draw near. "And the third?" the other man inquired presently. "Your sundown fancy with the interesting hair? Have you outworn her in a quarter of an hour, already seen her closer than love dares?" His voice rustled in his helmet like small clawed feet. "I don't think I could ever see her closely," the sentinel replied, "however close she came." His own voice was hushed and regretful, echoing with lost chances. "She has a newness," he said. "Everything is for the first time. See how she moves, how she walks, how she turns her head. All for the first time. The first time anyone has ever done these things. See how she draws her breath and lets it go again, as though no one else in the world knew that air was good. It is all for her. If I had learned that she had been born this very morning, I would only be surprised that she was so old." The second sentinel stared down from his tower at the three wanderers. The tall man saw him first, and next the dour woman. Their eyes reflected nothing but his armor, grim and cankered and empty. But then the girl in the ruined black cloak raised her head, and he stepped back from the parapet, putting out one tin glove against her glance. In a moment she passed into the shadow of the castle with her companions, and he lowered his hand. "She may be mad," he said calmly. "No grown girl looks like that unless she is mad. That would be annoying, but far preferable to the remaining possibility." "Which is?" the younger man prompted after a silence. "Which is that she was indeed born this morning. I would rather that she were mad. Let us go down now." When the man and the women reached the castle, the two sentries were standing on either side of the gate, their blunt, bent halberds crossed and their falcons hitched round in front of them. The sun had gone down, and their absurd armor grew steadily more menacing as the sea faded. The travelers hesitated, looking at one another. They had no dark castle at their backs, and their eyes were not hidden. "Give your names," said the parched voice of the second sentinel. The tall man stepped a pace forward. "I am Schmendrick the magician," he said. "This is Molly Grew, my helper. And this is the Lady Amalthea." He stumbled over the name of the white girl, as though he had never before spoken it. "We seek audience with King Haggard," he continued. "We have come a long way to see him." The second sentinel waited for the first to speak, but the younger man was looking only at the Lady Amalthea. I'm gonna kind of stumble over that a couple times. Impatiently, he said, "State your business with King Haggard." "I will," the magician replied. "To Haggard himself. What kind of royal matter could it be that I might confide to doormen and porters? Take us to the king." "What kind of royal matter could a wandering wizard with a foolish tongue have to discuss with King Haggard?" the second sentinel asked somberly. But he turned and strode through the castle gate, and the king's visitors straggled after him. Last wandered the younger sentinel, his step grown as tender as that of the Lady Amalthea, whose every movement he imitated unaware. She stayed a moment before the gate, looking out to sea, and the sentinel did the same. Hold on, I need a sip. Just a little sip. I'm trying to be a little bit more wary about, not letting my voice wear out. His former comrade called angrily to him, but the young sentry was on a different duty, answerable to a new captain for his derelictions. He entered at the gate only after the Lady Amalthea had chosen to go in. Then he followed, singing to himself in a dreamy drone. "What is it that is happening to me? What is it that is happening to me? I cannot tell whether to be glad or be afraid. What is it that is happening to me?" They crossed a cobbled courtyard where cold laundry groped their faces, and passed through a smaller door into a hall so vast that they could not see the walls or the ceiling in the darkness. Great stone pillars rushed up to them as they trudged across the hall, and they leaned away without ever really letting themselves be seen. Breath echoed in that huge place, and the footsteps of other smaller creatures sounded just as clearly as their own. Molly Grew stayed quite close to Schmendrick. After the great hall, there came another door, and then a thin stair. There were few windows, and no lights. The stair coiled tighter and tighter as it ascended, until it seemed that every step turned round on itself, and that the tower was closing on them all like a sweaty fist. The darkness looked at them and touched them. It had a rainy, doggy smell. Something rumbled somewhere deep and near. The tower trembled like a ship run aground, and answered with a low stone wail. The three travelers cried out, scrambling to keep their feet on the shuddering stairs, but their guide pressed on without faltering or speaking. The younger man whispered earnestly to the Lady Amalthea, "It's all right, don't be afraid. It's just the bowl." The sound was not repeated. Let me take another sip. My tea's already getting lukewarm. Let me pour some more real quick. I'll do it. Okay, anyways. The second sentinel halted abruptly, produced a key from a secret place, and jabbed it, apparently, straight into the blank wall. A section of the wall swung inward, and the small procession filed into a low, narrow chamber, with one window and a chair at the far end. There was nothing else. No other furnishings, no rug, no draperies, no tapestries. In the room were 5 people, the tall chair, and the measly light of the rising new moon. "This is King Haggard's throne room," said the sentinel. The magician gripped him by his mailed elbow and turned him until they faced each other. This is a cell. This is a tomb. No living king sits here. Take us to Haggard if he is alive. You must judge that for yourself, replied the scurrying voice of the sentinel. He unlaced his helmet and lifted it from his gray head. I am King Haggard, he said. Oh my. My voice was a little tickly. His eyes were the same color as the horns of the Red Bull. He was taller than Schmendrick, and though his face was bitterly lined, there was nothing fond or foolish in it. It was a pike's face, the jaws long and cold, the cheeks hard, the lean neck alive with power. He might have been 70 years old, or 80, or more. The first sentinel came forward now with his own helmet under his arm. Molly-Crew gasped when she saw his face, for it was the friendly, rumpled face of the young prince who had read a magazine while his princess tried to call a unicorn. King Haggard said, "This is Lear." "Hi," said Prince Lear. "Glad to meet you." His smile wriggled at their feet like a hopeful puppy, but his eyes, a deep shadowy blue behind stubby lashes, rested quietly on the eyes of the Lady Amalthea. She looked back at him, silent as a jewel, seeing him no more truly than men see unicorns. But the prince felt strangely, happily certain that she looked him round and through, and down into caverns that he had never known were there, where her glance echoed and sang. Prodigies began to waken somewhere southwest of his 12th rib, and he himself, still mirroring the Lady Amalthea, began to shine. "What is your concern with me?" Schmendrick the magician cleared his throat and bowed to the pale-eyed old man. "We seek to enter your service. Far and wide is the fabled court of King Haggard. I need no servants." The king turned away, his face and body suddenly slack with indifference. Yet Schmendrick sensed a curiosity lingering in the stone-colored skin and at the roots of the gray hair. He said cautiously, "But surely you keep some following. Simplicity is the richest adornment of a king, I grant you, but for such a king as Haggard—" "You are losing my interest," the rustling voice interrupted him again, "and that is very dangerous. In a moment I will have forgotten you quite entirely, and you will never be able to remember just what I did with you. What I forget not only ceases to exist, but never really existed in the first place." As he said this, his eyes, like those of his son, turned to meet the Lady Amalthea's eyes. "My court," he continued, "since you choose to call it that, consists of 4 men-at-arms. I would do without them if I could, for they cost more than they are worth, like everything else. But they take their turns as sentries and as cooks, and they give the appearance of an army from a distance. What other attendants should I need?" "But the pleasures of the court," the magician cried. "The music, the talk, the women and the fountains, the hunts and the masks and the great feasts." "They're nothing to me," King Haggard said. "I have known them all, and they have not made me happy. I will keep nothing near me that does not make me happy." The Lady Amalthea moved quietly past him to the window and looked out at the night sea. Schmendrick came about to catch the wind again and declared, "I understand you perfectly. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to you all the uses of this world. You are bored with bliss, satiated with sensation, jaded with jejune? That's a weird word. Joys. It is a king's affliction, and therefore no one wants the services of a magician more than a king does. For only to a magician is the world forever fluid, infinitely mutable and eternally new. Only he knows the secret of change. Only he knows truly that all things are crouched in eagerness to become something else, and it is from this universal tension that he draws his power. To a magician, March is May, snow is green, and grass is gray. This is that, or whatever you say. Get a magician today." He finished on one knee with both arms flung wide. King Haggard stepped nervously away from him, muttering, get up, you make my head hurt. Besides, I already have a royal magician." Schmendrick rose heavily to his feet, his face red and empty. "You never said. What is his name?" "He is called Mabrook," King Haggard replied. "I do not often speak of him. Even my men-at-arms do not know that he lives here in the castle. Mabrook is all that you have said a wizard should be, and much more that I doubt you dream of. He is known in his trade as the magician's magician. I can see no reason to replace him with some vagrant, nameless, clownish—" "Ah, but I can," Schmendrick broke in desperately. "I can think of one reason, uttered by you yourself not a minute since. The marvelous Mabrook does not make you happy." Over the king's fierce face there fell a slow shadow of disappointment and betrayal. For a breath he looked like a bewildered young man. "Why, no, that is true," King Haggard murmured. "Mabrook's magic has not delighted me for a long time. How long has it been, I wonder?" He clapped his hands briskly, crying out, "Mabrook, Mabrook! Appear, Mabrook!" "I am here," said a deep voice from a far corner of the room. An old man in a dark spangled gown and a pointed spangled hat was standing there, and no one could say surely that he had not been standing there in plain sight since they had entered the throne room. His beard and brows were white, and the cast of his face was mild and wise, but his eyes were hard as hailstones. "What does your majesty wish of me?" Let me take another sip real quick. Like I said earlier, we're trying to take this one slow. "Mabrook," King Haggard said, "this gentleman is of your fraternity. His name is Schmendrick." The old wizard's icy eyes widened slightly, and he peered at the shabby man. "Why, so it is," he exclaimed in seeming pleasure. "Schmendrick, my dear boy, how nice to see you. You won't remember me, but I was a dear, dear friend of your tutor, dear old Nikos. He had such high hopes for you, the poor man." Well, well, this is a surprise. And are you really still in the profession?" "My, you're a determined fellow. I always say perseverance is 9/10 of any art. Not that it's much help to be 9/10 an artist, of course. But what can it be that brings you here?" "He has come to take your place." King Haggard's voice was flat and final. "He is now my royal magician." Schmendrick's start of amazement was not lost on old Mabrook, though the wizard himself seemed little surprised by the king's decision. For a moment he obviously considered the worth of wrath, but instead he chose a tone of genial amusement. "As your majesty wills it, now and always," he purred. "But perhaps your majesty might be interested in learning a bit of the history of his new magician. I'm sure dear Schmendrick won't mind my mentioning that he is already something of a legend in the trade. Indeed, among adepts, he's best remembered as Nikos's Folly. His charming and complete inability to master the simplest rune, his creative way with the most childish rhyme of theurgy, let alone..." King Haggard made a thin motion with the edge of one hand, and Mabrook was suddenly silent. Prince Lear giggled. The king said, "I do not need to be persuaded of his unfitness for the position. A single glance at him tells me that, as a glance makes it plain that you are one of the great wizards of the world." Mabrook swelled gently, fondling his glorious beard and wrinkling his benign brow. But that is also nothing to me," King Haggard went on. "In the past you have performed whatever miracle I required of you, and all it has done has been to spoil my taste for miracles. No task is too vast for your powers, and yet, when the wonder is achieved, nothing is changed. It must be that great power cannot give me whatever it is that I really want. A master magician has not made me happy. I will see what an incompetent one can do. You may go, Mabrook." He nodded his head to dismiss the old wizard. Mabrook's semblance of affability vanished like a spark on snow, and with the same sound, his whole face became like his eyes. I am not packed off as easily as that, he said very softly. Not on a whim, even a king's whim, and not in favor of a fool. Beware, Haggard. Maverick is not one to anger lightly. A wind began to rise in the dark chamber. It came as much from one place as another, through the window, through the half-opened door. But its true source was the clenched figure of the wizard. The wind was cold and rank, a wet, hooty marsh wind, and it leaped here and there in the room like a gleeful animal discovering the flimsiness of human beings. Molly Grew shrank against Schmendrick, who looked uncomfortable. Prince Lear fidgeted his sword in and out of its sheath. Even King Haggard gave back a step before the triumphant grin of old Maverick. The walls of the room seemed to thaw and run away, and the wizard's starry gown became the huge howling night. Maverick spoke no word himself, but the wind was beginning to make a wicked grunting sound as it gained strength. In another moment it would become visible, burst into shape. Schmendrick opened his mouth, but if he were shouting a counterspell it could not be heard, and it did not work. In the darkness, Molly Grew saw the Lady Amalthea turning far away, stretching out a hand on which the ring and middle fingers were of equal length. The strange place on her forehead was glowing as bright as a flower. Then the wind was gone as though it had never been, and the stone walls were around them once more, the dull chamber as gay as noon after Maverick's night. The wizard was crouched almost to the floor, staring at the Lady Amalthea. His wise, benevolent face looked like the face of a drowned man, and his beard dripped thinly from his chin like stagnant water. Prince Lear took him by the arm. "Come on, old man," he said, not unkindly. "This way out, Grandad. I'll write you a reference." "I am going," Maverick said, "not from fear of you, you lump of steel dough, nor of your mad, ungrateful father, nor of your new magician. Much happiness may you have of him." His eyes met King Haggard's hungry eyes, and he laughed like a goat. "Haggard, I would not be you for all the world," he declared. You have let your doom in by the front door, though it will not depart that way. I would explain myself more fully, but I am no longer in your service. That is a pity, for there will come a time when none but a master will be able to save you. And in that hour you will have Schmendrick to call upon. Farewell, poor Haggard, farewell." Still laughing, he disappeared, but his mirth dwelled forever in the corners of that chamber like the smell of smoke or of old cold dust. "Well," King Haggard said in the grey moonlight. "Well." He came slowly toward Schmendrick and Molly, his feet silent, his head weaving almost playfully. "Stand still," he commanded when they moved. "I want to see your faces." His breath rasped like a knife on a grindstone as he peered from one of them to the other. "Closer," he grumbled, squinting through the dark. "Come closer, closer. I want to see you." "Light a light, then," said Molly Grew. The calmness of her own voice frightened her more than the fury of the old wizard had. It is easy to be brave for her sake, she thought. But if I begin being brave on my own account, where will it end? "I never light lights," the king replied. "What is the good of light?" He turned from them, muttering to himself. One face is almost guileless, almost foolish, but not quite foolish enough. The other's a face like my face, and that must mean danger. Yet I saw all that at the gate. Why did I let them enter then? Maverick was right. I have grown old and daft and easy. Still, I see only Haggard when I look in their eyes. Prince Lear stirred nervously as the king paced across the throne room toward the Lady Amalthea. She was again gazing out the window, and King Haggard had drawn very near before she wheeled swiftly, lowering her head in a curious manner. "I will not touch you," he said, and she stood still. Let me take another sip. "Why do you linger at the window?" he demanded. "What are you looking at?" "I am looking at the sea," said the Lady Amalthea. Her voice was low and tremorous, not with fear, but with life, as a new butterfly shivers in the sun. "Ah," said the king. "Yes, the sea is always good. There's nothing that I can look at for very long except the sea." Yet he stared at the Lady Amalthea's face for a long time, his own face giving back none of her light, as Prince Lear's had, but taking it in and keeping it somewhere. His breath was as musty as the wizard's wind, but the Lady Amalthea never moved. Suddenly he shouted, "What is the matter with your eyes? They are full of green leaves, crowded with trees and streams and small animals. Where am I? Why can I not see myself in your eyes?" The Lady Amalthea did not answer him. King Haggard swung around to face Schmendrick and Molly. His scimitar? I've never really had to pronounce that out loud. Or scimitar. His scimitar smile laid on its cold edge along their throats. "Who is she?" he demanded. Schmendrick coughed several times. "The Lady Amalthea is my niece," he offered. "I am her only living relative, and so her guardian. No doubt the state of her attire puzzles you, but it is easily explained. On our journey we were attacked by bandits and robbed of all our—" "What nonsense are you jabbering? What about her attire?" The king turned again to regard the white girl, and Schmendrick suddenly understood that neither King Haggard nor his son had noticed that she was naked under the rags of his cloak. The Lady Amalthea held herself so gracefully that she made shreds and tatters seem the only fitting dress for a princess. And besides, she did not know that she was naked. It was the armored king who seemed bare before her. King Haggard said, "What she wears, what may have befallen you, what you all are to one another, these things are fortunately no concern of mine. In such matters you may lie to me as much as you dare. I want to know who she is. I want to know how she broke Mabrick's magic without saying a word. I want to know why there are green leaves and fox cubs in her eyes. Speak quickly and avoid the temptation to lie, especially about the green leaves. Answer me." Schmendrick did not reply quickly. He made a few small sounds of an earnest nature, but not a sensible word was among them. Molly gathered her courage to answer, even though she suspected that it was impossible to speak the truth to King Haggard. Something in his winter presence blighted all words, tangled meanings, and bent honest intentions into shapes as tormented as the towers of his castle. Still she would have spoken, but another voice was heard in the gloomy chamber. The light, kind, silly voice of the young Prince Lear. "Father, what difference does it make? She's here now." King Haggard sighed. It was not a gentle sound, but low and scraping. Not a sound of surrender, but the rumbling meditation of a tiger taught to spring. "Of course, you are right," he said. "She is here. They are all here. And whether they mean my doom or not, I will look at them for a while. A pleasant air of disaster attends them. Perhaps that is what I want." To Schmendrick he said curtly, "As my magician, you will entertain me when I wish to be entertained, in manners variously profound and frivolous. You will be expected to know when you are required, and in what guise, for I cannot be forever identifying my moods and desires for your benefit. You will receive no wages, since that is certainly not what you came here for. As for your drab, your assistant, whatever you choose to call her, she will serve me also if she wishes to remain in my castle. From this evening she is cook and maidservant together, scrubwoman and scullery maid as well." He paused, seemingly waiting for Molly to protest, but she only nodded. The moon had moved away from the window, but Prince Lear could only see that the dark room was no darker for that. The cool brightness of the Lady Amalthea grew more slowly than had Marbrick's wind, but the prince understood quite well that it was far more dangerous. He wanted to write poems by that light, and he had never wanted to write poems before. "You may come and go as you please," said King Haggard to the Lady Amalthea. "It may have been foolish of me to admit you, but I am not so foolish as to forbid you this door or that. My secrets guard themselves. Will yours do the same? What are you looking at? I'm looking at the sea, the Lady Amalthea replied again. Yes, the sea is always good, said the king. We will look at it together one day. He walked slowly to the door. It will be curious, he said, to have a creature in the castle whose presence causes Lear to call me father for the first time since he was 5 years old. 6, said Prince Lear. I was 6. 5 or 6, the king said. It had stopped making me happy long before, and it does not make me happy now. Nothing has yet changed because she is here. He was gone as silently as Maverick, and they heard his tin boots ticking on the stairs. Molly Grew went softly to the Lady Amalthea and stood by her at the window. What is it? She asked. What do you see? Schmendrick leaned on the throne, regarding Prince Lear with his long green eyes. Away in the valley of Hagsgate, the cold roar sounded again. I will find quarters for you, said Prince Lear. Are you hungry? I'll get you something to eat. I know where there is some cloth, fine satin. You can make a dress. No one answered him. The heavy night swallowed his words, and it seemed to him that the Lady Amalthea never heard nor saw him. She did not move, and yet he was certain that she was going away from him as he stood there, like the moon. Let me help you, Prince Lear said. What can I do for you? Let me help you. Okay, that's the end of chapter 9. So we're on to chapter 10 right now. Let me take a sip and break. A little bit of a sip and break, perhaps. Yeah, those were some big sips. I think I'm gonna pour the rest of my tea into my cup and then put the cup on the warmer instead. I really hope I don't spill anything this time. That'd be bad. Okay. Set that there, set that aside. I probably should bring my water closer, although I don't like to drink it too much because it's cold. But it's good for like lubricating the throat meat. Alright, so I think we're just gonna be moving right along. What can I do for you? Prince Lear asked. Nothing very much just now, Molly Grew said. The water was all I needed. Unless you want to peel the potatoes, which would be alright with me. No, I didn't mean that. I mean, yes, I will if you want me to, but I was talking to her. I mean, when I talk to her, that's why I keep asking. Sit down and peel me a few potatoes, Molly said. It'll give you something to do with your hands. They were in the scullery, a dank little room smelling strongly of rotting turnips and fermenting beets. I'm sorry. I hate that tea makes me, like, hiccupy. Okay, anyways. A dozen earthenware dishes were piled in one corner, and a very small fire was shivering under a tripod, trying to boil a large pot of grey water. Molly sat at a rude table which was covered with potatoes, leeks, onions, peppers, carrots, and other vegetables, most of them limp and spotty. Prince Lear stood before her, rocking slowly along his feet and twisting his big soft fingers together. I killed another dragon this morning, he said presently. That's nice, Molly answered. That's fine. How many does that make now? 5. This one was smaller than the others, but it really gave me more trouble. I couldn't get near it on foot, so I had to go in with the lance, and my horse got pretty badly burned. It was funny about the horse. Molly interrupted him. Sit down, Your Highness, and stop doing that. I start to twitch all over just watching you. Prince Lear sat down opposite her. He drew a dagger from his belt and moodily began peeling potatoes. Molly regarded him with a slight, slow smile. I brought her the head, he said. She was in the chamber, as she usually is. I dragged that head all the way up the stairs to lay it at her feet. He sighed and nicked his finger with the dagger. Damn. I didn't mind that. All the way up the stairs, it was a dragon's head. The proudest gift anyone can give anyone. But when she looked at it, suddenly it became a sad, battered mess of scales and horns, gristly tongue, bloody eyes. I feel like some country butcher who had brought his lass a nice chunk of fresh meat as a token of his love. And then she looked at me, and I was sorry I had killed the thing. Sorry for killing a dragon. He slashed at a rubbery potato and wounded himself again. Take a sip. I could take a little sip. A little itty bitty sip. I keep kind of absent-mindedly, like, listening out into, like, the front yard. Because funny story, I actually ordered a mini stream deck. And it's supposed to get here, but for whatever reason, they, like, the estimated delivery time is, like, right now, somewhere between, like, 6 and 9 p.m. It's like, why are you even making people work that late? Come on now. We could do this better, I think. Cut away from yourself, not toward, Molly advised him. You know, I really think you could stop slaying dragons for the Lady Amalthea. If 5 of them hadn't moved her, 1 more isn't likely to do it. Try something else. But what's left on Earth that I haven't tried? Prince Lear demanded. I have swum 4 rivers, each in full flood and none less than a mile wide. I have climbed 7 mountains never before climbed, slept 3 nights in the marsh of the hanged men, and walked alive out of that forest where the flowers burn your eyes and the nightingales sing poison. I have ended my betrothal to the princess I had agreed to marry, and if you don't think that was a heroic deed, you don't know her mother. I have vanquished exactly 15 black knights, waiting by 15 fords in their black pavilions, challenging all who come to cross. And I've long since lost count of the witches in the thorny woods, the giants, the demons disguised as damsels, the glass hills, fatal riddles, and terrible tasks. The magic apples, rings, lamps, potions, swords, cloaks, boots, neckties, and nightcaps. Not to mention the winged horses, the basilisks, and the sea serpents, and all the rest of the livestock. He raised his head, and the dark blue eyes were confused and sad. And all for nothing, he said. I cannot touch her, whatever I do. For her sake, I have become a hero. I, sleepy Lear, my father's sport and shame. But I might just as well have remained the dull fool I was. My great deeds mean nothing to her. Molly took up her own knife and began to slice the peppers. Then perhaps the Lady Amalthea is not to be won by great deeds. The prince stared at her, frowning in puzzlement. Is there another way to win a maiden? He asked earnestly. Molly, do you know another way? Will you tell it to me? He leaned across the table to seize her hand. I like being brave well enough, but I will be a lazy coward again if you think that would be better. The sight of her makes me want to do battle with all evil and ugliness, but it also makes me want to sit still and be unhappy. What should I do, Molly? I don't know, she said, suddenly embarrassed. Kindness, courtesy, good works, that sort of thing. A good sense of humor. A small copper and ashes cat with a crooked ear jumped into her lap, purring thunderously and leaning against her hand. Hoping to change the subject, she asked, What about your horse? What was funny? But Prince Lear was staring at the little cat with the crooked ear. Where did he come from? Is he yours? No, Molly said. I just feed him and hold him sometimes. She stroked the cat's thin throat, and it closed its eyes. I thought he lived here. The prince shook his head. My father hates cats. He says that there is no such thing as a cat. It is just a shape that all manner of imps, hobs, and devilkins like to put on to gain easy entrance into the homes of men. He would kill it if he knew you had it here. What about the horse? Molly asked. Prince Lear's face grew glum again. That was strange. When she took no delight in the gift itself, I thought she might be interested to know how it was won. So I told her about the view and the charge, you know. About the hissing sound and the naked wings, and the way dragons smell, especially on a rainy morning, and the way the black blood jumped at the point of my lance. But she heard none of it, not a word, until I spoke of the rush of fire that nearly burned my poor horse's legs from under him. Then she came back from wherever she goes when I talk to her, and she said that she must go and see my horse. So I led her to the stable where the poor brute stood crying with the pain, and she put her hand on him, on his legs, and he stopped moaning. That's a terrible sound they make when they're really hurt. When they stop, it's like a song. The prince's dagger lay glittering among the potatoes. Outside, great gusts of rain growled round and round the castle walls, but those in the scullery could only hear it, for there was not a single window in the cold room. Nor was there any light except for the meager glow of the cooking fire. It made the cat dozing in Molly's lap look like a heap of autumn leaves. And what happened then, she asked, when the Lady Amalthea touched your horse? Nothing happened, nothing at all. Prince Lear suddenly seemed to become angry. He slammed his hand down on the table, and leeks and lentils leapt in all directions. Did you expect something to happen? She did. Did you expect the beast's burns to heal on the instant? The crackling skin to knit, the black flesh to be whole again? She did. By my hope of her, I swear it. And when his legs didn't grow well under her hand, then she ran away. I don't know where she is now. His voice softened as he spoke, and the hand on the table curled sadly on its side. He rose and went to look into the pot over the fire. It's boiling, he said, if you want to put the vegetables in. She wept when my horse's legs did not heal. I heard her weeping, and yet there were no tears in her eyes when she ran away. Everything else was there, but no tears. Let me take another sip. A little sippy. Molly put the cat gently on the floor and began gathering the venerable vegetables for the pot. Prince Lear watched her as she moved back and forth around the table and across the dewy floor. She was singing. If I danced with my feet as I dance in my dreaming, as graceful and gleaming as death in disguise. Oh, that would be sweet, but then I would hunger to be 10 years younger, or wedded or wise. The prince said, Who is she, Molly? What kind of woman is it who believes, who knows, for I saw her face, that she can cure wounds with a touch, and who weeps without tears? Molly went on about her work, still humming to herself. Any woman can weep without tears, she answered over her shoulder, and most can heal with their hands. It depends on the wound. She's a woman, your highness, and that's riddle enough. But the prince stood up to bar her way, and she stopped, her apron full of herbs and her hair trailing into her eyes. Prince Lear's face bent towards her, older by 5 dragons, but handsome and silly still. He said, You sing. My father sets you to the weariest work there is to do, and still you sing. There has never been singing in this castle, or cats, or the smell of good cooking. It is the Lady Amalthea who causes this, as she causes me to ride out in the morning seeking danger. I was always a fair cook, Molly said mildly, living in the greenwood with Cully and his men for 17 years. Prince Lear continued as though she had not spoken. I want to serve her as you do, to help her find whatever she's come here to find. I wish to be whatever she has most need of. Tell her so. Will you tell her so?" Even as he spoke, a soundless step sounded in his eyes, and the sigh of a satin gown troubled his face. The Lady Amalthea stood in the doorway. A season in King Haggard's chill domain had not dimmed or darkened her. Rather, the winter had sharpened her beauty until it invaded the beholder like a barbed arrow that could not be withdrawn. Her white hair was caught up with a blue ribbon, and her gown was lilac. It did not fit her well. Molly Crew was an indifferent seamstress, and satin made her nervous. But the Lady Amalthea seemed more lovely for the poor work, for the cold stones and the smell of turnips. There was rain in her hair. Prince Lear bowed to her, a quick, crooked bow, as though someone had hit him in the stomach. "My lady," he mumbled, "you really should cover your head when you go out in this weather." The Lady Amalthea sat down at the table, and the little autumn-colored cat immediately sprang up before her, purring swiftly and very softly. She put out her hand, but the cat slid away, still purring. He did not appear frightened, but he would not let her touch his rusty fur. The Lady Amalthea beckoned, and the cat wriggled all over like a dog, but he would not come near. Prince Lear said hoarsely, "I must go. There is an ogre of some sort devouring village maidens 2 days' ride from here. It is said that he can be slain only by one who wields the great axe of Duke Alban. Unfortunately, Duke Alban himself was one of the first consumed. He was dressed as a village maiden at the time to deceive the monster, and there is little doubt who holds the great axe now. If I do not turn, think of me. Farewell." "Farewell, your highness," Molly said. The prince bowed again and left the scullery on his noble errand. He looked back only once. "You are cruel to him," Molly said. The Lady Amalthea did not look up. She was offering her open palm to the crook-eared cat, but he stayed where he was, shivering with the desire to go to her. "Cruel?" she asked. "How can I be cruel? That is for mortals." But then she did raise her eyes, and they were great with sorrow, and with something very near to mockery. She said, "So is kindness." Molly Crew busied herself with the cooking pot, stirring the soup and seasoning it, bustling numbly. In a low voice she remarked, "You might give him a gentle word at the very least. He has undergone mighty trials for you." "But what word shall I speak?" asked the Lady Amalthea. "I have said nothing to him, yet every day he comes to me with more heads, more horns and hides and tails, more enchanted jewels and bewitched weapons. What will he do if I speak?" Molly said, "He wishes you to think of him. Knights and princes know only one way to be remembered. It's not his fault. I think he does very well." The Lady Amalthea turned her eyes to the cat again. Her long fingers twisted at a seam of the satin gown. "No, he does not want my thoughts," she said softly. "He wants me as much as the Red Bull did, and with no more understanding. But he frightens me even more than the Red Bull, because he has a kind heart. No, I will never speak a promising word to him." The pale mark on her brow was invisible in the gloom of the scullery. She touched it and then drew her hand away quickly, as though the mark hurt her. "The horse died," she said to the little cat. "I could do nothing." Molly turned quickly and put her hands on the Lady Amalthea's shoulders. Beneath the silk cloth the flesh was cold and hard as any stone of King Haggard's castle. "Oh, my lady," she whispered, "that is because you are out of your true form. When you regain yourself, it will all return. All your power, all your strength, all your sureness. It will come back to you." Had she dared, she would have taken the white girl in her arms and lulled her like a child. She had never dreamed of such a thing before. But the Lady Amalthea answered, The magician gave me only the semblance of a human being. The seeming, but not the spirit. If I had died then, I would still have been a unicorn. The old man knew, the wizard. He said nothing to spite Haggard, but he knew. Of itself, her hair escaped the blue ribbon and came hurrying down her neck and over her shoulders. The cat was all but won by his eagerness. He lifted a paw to play with it, but then he drew back once more and sat on his haunches, tail curled around his front feet, queer head to the side. His eyes were green, speckled with gold. But that was long ago, the girl said. Now I am two, myself and this other that you call my lady. For she is here as truly as I am now, though once she was only a veil over me. She walks in the castle, she sleeps, she dresses herself, she takes her meals, and she thinks her own thoughts. If she has no power to heal or to quiet, she still has another magic. Men speak to her, saying Lady Amalthea, and she answers them, or she does not answer. The king is always watching her out of his pale eyes, wondering what she is. And the king's son wounds himself with loving her, and wonders who she is. And every day she searches the sea and the sky, the castle and the courtyard, the keep and the king's face, for something she cannot always remember. What is it? What is it that she is seeking in this strange place? She knew a moment ago, but she has forgotten. She turned her face to Molly Grew, and her eyes were not the unicorn's eyes. They were lovely still, but in a way that had a name, and as a human woman is beautiful. Their depth could be sounded and learned, and their degree of darkness was quite describable. Molly saw fear and loss and bewilderment when she looked into them, and herself, and nothing more. Okay, let me take another sip. Unicorns, she said. The Red Bull has driven them all away, but you are the last unicorn. You came here to find the others and to set them free, and so you will. Slowly the deep secret sea returned to the Lady Amalthea's eyes, filling them until they were as old and dark as and unknowable and indescribable as the sea. Molly watched it happen and was afraid, but she gripped the bowed shoulders even more tightly, as though her hands could draw despair like a lightning rod. And as she did so, there shivered in the scullery floor a sound she had heard before, a sound like great teeth, molars grinding together. The Red Bull was turning in his sleep. I wonder if he dreams, Molly thought. The Lady Amalthea said, I must go to him. There is no other way, and no time to spare. In this form or my own, I must face him again, even if all my people are dead and there is nothing to be saved. I must go to him before I forget myself forever, but I do not know the way, and I am lonely. The little cat switched his tail and made an odd sound that was neither meow nor purr. Snack break? I mean, honestly, I didn't really bring any snacks. I had a big dinner, if that makes you feel any better. Leftovers. Lots of leftovers. I will go with you, Molly said. I do not know the way down to the bowl either, but there must be one. Schmendrick will come too. He'll make the way for us if we can't find it. I hope for no help from the magician, the Lady Amalthea replied disdainfully. I see him every day playing the fool for King Haggard, amusing him by his failures, but by blundering at even the most trifling trick. He says that it is all he can do until his power speaks in him again, but it never will. He is no magician now, but the king's clown. Molly's face suddenly hurt her, and she turned away to inspect the soup again. Answering past a sharpness in her throat, she said, He's doing it for you. While you brood and mope and become someone else, he jigs and jests for Haggard, diverting him so that you may have time to find your folk, if they are to be found. But it cannot be long before the king tires of him, as he tires of all things, and casts him down to his dungeons or someplace darker. You do wrong to mock him." Her voice was a child's thin, sad mumble. She said, "But that will never happen to you. Everyone loves you." They had a moment to look at each other, the two women, the one fair and foreign in the cold, low room, the other appearing quite at home in such surroundings, an angry little beetle with her own kitchen beauty. Then they heard boots scraping, armor clicking, and the gusty voices of old men. King Haggard's 4 men-at-arms came trooping into the scullery. They were all at least 70 years old, gaunt and limping, fragile as crusted snow, but all clad from head to foot in King Haggard's miserly mail and bearing his wry weapons. They entered hailing Molly Grew cheerfully and asking what she had made for their supper. But at the sight of the Lady Amalthea, all 4 became very quiet and bowed deep bows that made them gasp. Yeah, I gotta keep sipping my tea at increased frequencies. "My lady," said the oldest of the men, "command your servants. We are used men, spent men, but if you would see miracles, you have only to request the impossible of us. We will become young again if you wish it so." His 3 comrades muttered their agreement, but the Lady Amalthea whispered in answer, "No, no, you will never be young again." Then she fled from them with her wild, blinding hair hiding her face, and the satin gown hissing. "How wise she is," the oldest man-at-arms declared. "She understands that not even her beauty can do battle with time. It is a rare, sad wisdom for one so young. That soup smells delicious, Molly." "It smells too savory for this place," a second man grumbled, as they all sat down around the table. "Haggard hates good food. He says that no meal is good enough to justify all the money and effort wasted in preparing it. It is an illusion, says he, and an expense. Live as I do, undeceived. Bah!" He shuddered and grimaced, and the others laughed. "To live like Haggard," said another man-at-arms as Molly spooned the steaming soup into his bowl. "That will be my fate in the next world, if I don't behave myself in this one." Why do you stay in his service, then?" Molly demanded. She sat down with them and rested her chin on her hands. "He pays you no wages," she said, "and he feeds you as little as he dares. He sends you out in the worst weather to steal for him in Hagsgate, for he never spends a penny of the wealth in his strong room. He forbids everything, from lights to lutes, from fires to fairs and singing to sinning, from books and beer and talk of spring to games you play with bits of string. Why not leave him? What in the world is there to keep you here?" The 4 old men looked nervously at one another, coughing and sighing. The first said, "It is our age. Where else could we go? We are too old to be wandering the roads looking for work and shelter." "It is our age," said the second man-at-arms. "When you are old, anything that does not disturb you is a comfort. Cold and darkness and boredom long ago lost their sharp edges for us. But warmth, singing, spring, no, they would all be disturbances. There are worse things than living like Haggard." The third man said, "Haggard is older than we are. In time, Prince Lear will be king in this country, and I will not leave the world until I have seen that day. I have always been fond of the boy since he was small." Molly found that she was not hungry. She looked around at the faces of the old men and listened to the sounds of their seamy lips and shrunken throats made as they drank her soup, and she was suddenly glad that King Haggard always had his meals alone. Molly inevitably came to care for anyone she fed. Cautiously, she asked them, "Have you ever heard a tale that Prince Lear is not Have you ever heard a tale that Prince Lear is not Hagrid's adopted nephew at all? The men-at-arms showed no surprise at the question. Aye, the eldest replied, we know that story. It may well be true, for the prince certainly bears no family resemblance to the king. But what of it? Better a stolen stranger ruled the land than a true son of King Hagrid. But if the prince was stolen from Hagsgate, Molly cried, then he is the man who will make the curse on this castle come true. And she repeated the rhyme that the mandarin had recited at the inn at Hagsgate. Yet none but one of Hagsgate town may bring the castle swirling down. But the old men shook their heads, grinning with teeth as rusty as their casques and corslets. Not Prince Lear, the third man said. The prince may slay 1,000 dragons, but he will level no castles, overthrow no kings. It is not in his nature. He is a dutiful son who seeks, alas, only to be worthy of the man he calls his father. Not Prince Lear. The rhyme must speak of some other. And even if Prince Lear were the one, the second man added, even if the curse had marked him for its messenger, still he would fail. For between King Hagrid and any doom stands the Red Bull. A silence sprang into the room and stood there, darkening all faces with its savage shadow and chilling the good hot soup with its breath. The little autumn cat stopped purring on Molly's lap, and the thin cooking fire cowered down. The cold scullery walls seemed to draw closer together. The fourth man-at-arms, who had not spoken before, called across the dark to Molly Grew. There is a true reason that we stay in Hagrid's employ. He does not wish us to leave, and what King Hagrid wishes or does not wish is the only concern of the Red Bull. We are Hagrid's minions, but we are the Red Bull's prisoners. Molly's hand was steady as she stroked the cat, but her voice was pinched and dry when she spoke. What is the Red Bull to King Hagrid? I need another sip. Oh gosh. It was the oldest man-at-arms who answered. We do not know. The bull has always been there. Always been here. It serves Hagrid and his army and his bulwark. It is his strength and the source of his strength. And it must be his one companion as well, for I am sure he descends to its lair betimes, down some secret stair. But whether it obeys Hagrid from choice or compulsion, and whether the bull or the king is the master, that we have never known. The fourth man, who was the youngest, leaned toward Molly Grew, his pink wet eyes suddenly eager. He said, the Red Bull is a demon, and its reckoning for attending Hagrid will one day be Hagrid himself. Another man interrupted him, insisting that the clearest evidence showed that the bull was King Hagrid's enchanted slave, and would be until it broke the bewitchment that had held it and destroyed its former lord. They began to shout and spill their soup. But Molly asked, not loudly, but in a way that made them all stand still, do you know what a unicorn is? Have you ever seen one? Of everything alive in the little room, only the cat in the silence seemed to look back at her with any understanding. The four men blinked and belched and rubbed their eyes. Deep, restless, the sleeping bull stirred again. The meal being over, the men-at-arms saluted Molly Grew and left the scullery, 2 for their beds, 2 to take up their night's vigil in the rain. The oldest of the men waited until the others were gone, before he quietly said to Molly, be careful of the Lady Amalthea. When she first came here, her beauty was such that even this accursed castle became beautiful too, like the moon, which is only a shining stone. But she has been here too long. Now she is as beautiful as ever, but the rooms and roofs that contain her are somehow meaner for her presence. He gave a long sigh, which frayed into a whine. I am familiar with that kind of beauty, he said. but I have never seen that other sort before. Be careful of her. She should go away from here. Alone, Molly put her face in the little cat's random fur. The cooking fire fluttered low, but she did not get up to feed it. Small, swift creatures scuttled across the room, making a sound like King Haggard's voice. And the rain rumbled against the castle walls, sounding like the Red Bull. Then, as though in answer, she heard the bull. His bellows shattered the stones under her feet, and she clutched desperately at the table to keep herself and the cat from plunging down to him. She cried out. Trying to swallow, but it's hard. The cat said, "He's going out. He goes out every sundown to hunt for the strange white beast that escaped him. You know that perfectly well. Don't be stupid." The hungering roar came again, further away. Molly caught her breath and stared at the little cat. She was not as amazed as another might have been. These days she was harder to surprise than most women. "Could you always talk?" she asked the cat. "Or was it the sight of the Lady Amalthea that gave you speech?" The cat licked a front paw reflectively. "It was the sight of her that made me feel like talking," he said at length. "And let us leave it at that. So that is a unicorn. She's very beautiful." "How do you know she's a unicorn?" Molly demanded. "And why were you afraid to let her touch you? I saw you. You were afraid of her." "I doubt that I will feel like talking for very long," the cat replied without rancor. "I would not waste time in foolishness if I were you. As to your first question, no cat out of its first fur can ever be deceived by appearances, unlike human beings who enjoy them. As for your second question..." Here he faltered and suddenly became very interested in washing. Nor would he speak until he had licked himself fluffy and then licked himself smooth again. Even then he would not look at Molly, but examined his claws. "If she had touched me," he said very softly, "I would have been hers and not my own, not ever again. I wanted her to touch me, but I could not let her. No cat will. We let human beings caress us because it is pleasant enough and calms them, but not her. The price is more than a cat can pay." Molly picked him up then, and he purred into her neck for such a long while that she began to fear that his moment of speech had passed. But presently he said, "You have very little time. Soon she'll no longer remember who she is, or why she came to this place, and the Red Bull will no longer roar in the night for her. It may be that she'll marry that good prince who loves her." The cat pushed his head hard into Molly's suddenly still hand. "Do that," he commanded. "The prince is very brave to love a unicorn. A cat can appreciate valiant absurdity." "No," Molly Grew said. "No, that cannot be. She is the last." "Well then, she must do what she came to do," the cat replied. She must take the king's way down to the bull." Molly held him so fiercely that he gave a mouse-like squeak of protest. "Do you know the way?" she asked, as eagerly as Prince Lear demanded of her. "Tell me the way. Tell me where we must go." She put the cat down on the table and took her hands off him. The cat made no answer for a long time, but his eyes grew brighter and brighter, gold shivering down to cover the green. His crooked ear twitched, and the black tip of his tail, and nothing more. "When the wine drinks itself," he said, "when the skull speaks, when the clock strikes the right time, only then will you find the tunnel that leads to the Red Bull's lair." He tucked his paws under his chest and added, "There's a trick to it, of course." "I'll bet," Molly said grimly. "There's a horrible, crumbly old skull stuck up high on a pillar in the great hall, but it hasn't had anything to say for some time. The clock that stands nearby is mad and strikes when it pleases. Midnight every hour, 17 o'clock at 4, or perhaps not a sound for a week. And the wine. Oh, cat, wouldn't it be simpler just to show me the tunnel? You know where it is, don't you?" "Of course I know," answered the cat. with a glinting, curling yawn. Of course it would be simpler for me to show you. Save a lot of time and trouble. His voice was becoming a sleepy drawl, and Molly realized that, like the King Haggard himself, he was losing interest. Quickly she asked him, "Tell me one thing, then. What became of the unicorns? Where are they?" The cat yawned again. "Near and far, far and near," he murmured. "They are within sight of your lady's eyes, but almost out of reach of her memory. They are coming closer, and they are going away." He closed his eyes. Molly's breath came like rope, fretting against her harsh throat. "Damn you, why won't you help me?" she cried. "Why must you always speak in riddles?" Nah. Let me swallow. Let me actually take a sip of water. One eye opened slowly, green and cold as sunlight in the woods. The cat said, "I am what I am. I would tell you what you want to know if I could, for you have been kind to me. But I am a cat, and no cat anywhere ever gave anyone a straight answer." His last few words drowsed away into a deep, regular purr, and he was asleep with one eye partly open. Molly held him on her lap and stroked him, and he purred in his sleep, but he did not speak again. Okay, on to chapter 11. I hope this one's long, because it's the last one we're gonna read tonight. I hope I didn't, blow out the microphone with that. I don't think I did. For some reason I had some stuff in my throat, like a little bit of phlegm. I don't know why. It just happened. I just checked my phone, and apparently the package is still out for delivery. Whether or not it actually comes tonight, I'm like my suspicion is growing more towards that it won't. So that's the thing. Hopefully, if not today, then tomorrow. Then let me take another sip. Okay. Let's see. Prince Lear came home 3 days after he set out to slay the maiden fancying ogre, with the great axe of Duke Alban slung behind him, and the ogre's head bumping at his saddle bow. He offered neither prize to the Lady Amalthea, nor did he rush to find her with the monster's blood still brown on his hands. He had made up his mind, as he explained to Molly Grew in the scullery that evening, never more to trouble the Lady Amalthea with his attentions, but to live quietly in the thought of her, serving her ardently until his lonely death, but seeking neither her company, her admiration, nor her love. "I will be as anonymous as the air she breathes," he said, "as invisible as the force that holds her on the earth." Thinking about it for a little, he added, "I may write a poem for her now and then, and slip it under her door, or just leave it somewhere for her to chance upon, but I won't ever sign the poem." "It's very noble," Molly said. She felt relieved that the prince was giving up his courtship, and amused as well, and somewhat sad. "Girls like poems better than dead dragons and magic swords," she offered. "I always did, anyway, when I was a girl. The reason I ran off with Cully." But Prince Lear interrupted her, saying firmly, "No, do not give me hope. I must learn to live without hope as my father does, and perhaps we will understand each other at last." He dug into his pockets, and Molly heard paper crackling. "Actually, I've written a few poems about it. Hope and her and so on. You might look them over if you wanted to." "I'd be very pleased," Molly said. "But will you never go out again, then, to fight with the Black Knights and ride through rings of fire?" The words were meant teasingly, but she found as she spoke that she would have been a little sorry if it were so, for his adventures had made him much handsomer and taken off a lot of weight, and given him, besides, a hint of the musky fragrance of death that clings to all heroes. But the prince shook his head, looking almost embarrassed. "Oh, I suppose I'll keep my hand in," he muttered. "But it wouldn't be for the show of it, or for her to find out. It was like that at first, but you get into the habit of rescuing people, breaking enchantments, challenging the wicked duke in fair combat. It's hard to give up being a hero once you get used to it. Do you like the first poem?" "It certainly has a lot of feeling," she said. "Can you really rhyme bloomed with ruined?" "It needs a bit of smoothing out," Prince Lear admitted. "Miracle's the one I'm worried about. I was wondering about grackle myself." "No, the spelling. Is it one R and two L's, or the other way around?" "One R anyway, I think," Molly said. "Schmendrick, for the magician had just stooped through the doorway. How many R's in miracle?" "Two," he answered wearily. It has the same root as mirror." Molly ladled him out a bowl of broth, and he sat down at the table. His eyes were hard and cloudy as jade, and one of the lids was twitching. "I can't do this very much longer," he said slowly. "It isn't this horrible place, and it isn't having to be listening for him all the time. I'm getting rather good at that. It's the wretched sheepjack flummery he has me It's the wretched sheepjack flummery he has me perform for him hours on end, all night last night. I wouldn't mind if he asked for the real magic, or even for simple conjuring. But it's always the rings and the goldfish, the cards and the scarves and the string. Exactly as it was in the Midnight Carnival. I can't do it. Not much more." "But that was what he wanted you for," Molly protested. "If he wanted real magic, he'd have kept the old magician, that Maverick." Schmendrick raised his head and gave her a look that was almost amused. "I didn't mean it like that," she said. "Besides, it's only for a little while, until we find the way to the Red Bull that the cat told me about." She lowered her voice to a whisper as she spoke this last, and both of them glanced quickly over at Prince Lear. But he was sitting on a stool in the corner, evidently writing another poem. "Gazelle," he murmured, tapping his pen against his lips. "Demoiselle, citadel, asphodel, philomel, parallel." He chose farewell and scribbled rapidly. Let me take another sip. "We will never find the way," Schmendrick said very quietly, "even if the cat told the truth, which I doubt. Haggard will make sure we never have time to investigate the skull and the clock. Why do you suppose he piles more work on you every day, if not to keep you from prowling and prying in the Great Hall? Why do you think he keeps me entertaining him? Why do you think he keeps me entertaining? I said that right the first time. Why do you think he keeps me entertaining him with my carnival tricks? Why do you think he took me as his wizard in the first place? Molly, he knows, I'm sure of it. He knows what she is, though he doesn't quite believe it yet. But when he does, he'll know what to do. He knows. I see it in his face sometimes." "The lift of longing and the crash of loss," Prince Lear said. "The bitterness of tumpty-umpty-os, cross, boss, moss, damn." Schmendrick leaned across the table. "We can't stay here and wait for him to strike. The only hope we have is to escape at night, by sea perhaps, if I can lay hold of a boat somewhere. The men-at-arms will look the other way, and the gate—" "But the others," she cried softly. "How can we leave, when she has come so far to find the other unicorns? And we know they were here." Yet one small, tender, treacherous part of her was suddenly eager to be convinced of the quest's failure, and she knew it, and was angry at Schmendrick. "Well, but what about your magic?" she asked. What about your own little search? Are you going to give that up too? Will she die in human shape and you live forever? You might as well let the bull have her then. The magician sank back, his face gone, as pale and crumpled as a washerwoman's fingers. It doesn't really matter one way or the other, he said, almost to himself. She's no unicorn now, but a mortal woman. Someone for that lout to sigh over and write poems about. Maybe Hagrid won't find her out after all. She'll be his daughter and he'll never know. That's funny. Yeah. God, why am I like having such a hard time swallowing? He put his soup aside untasted and leaned his head into his hands. I couldn't change her back into a unicorn if we did find the others, he said. There's no magic in me. Schmendrick, she began. But at that moment he jumped to his feet and rushed out of the scullery, though she had not heard the king summon him. Prince Lear never looked up, but went on drumming meters and sampling rhymes. Molly hung a kettle over the fire for the sentry's tea. I've got it all but the final couplet, Lear said presently. Do you want to hear it now, or would you rather wait? Whichever you like, she said. So he read it then, but she never heard a word of it. Fortunately, the men-at-arms came in before he had finished reading, and he was too shy to ask her opinion in their presence. By the time they left, he was working on something else, and it was very late when he bade her good night. Molly was sitting at the table holding her motley cat. The new poem was meant to be a sestina, and Prince Lear's head was jangling happily as he juggled the end words on his way up the stairs to his chamber. I'll leave the first one at her door, he thought, and save the others until tomorrow. He was debating his original decision against signing his work and playing with such pen names as The Knight of the Shadows and Le Chevalier Ami. When he turned a corner and met the Lady Amalthea, she was coming down quickly in the dark, and when she saw him, she made a strange bleating sound and stood still, 3 steps above him. She wore a robe that one of the king's men had stolen for her in Hagsgate. Her hair was down and her feet were bare, and the sight of her on the stairs sent such a sorrow licking through Prince Lear's bones that he dropped his poems and his pretenses together and actually turned to run. But he was a hero in all ways, and he turned bravely back to face her, saying in a calm and courtly manner, Give you good evening, my lady. God, I can't read today. The Lady Amalthea stared at him through the gloom, putting out a hand, but drawing it back before she touched him. Who are you? She whispered. Are you Rook? I'm Lear, he answered, suddenly frightened. Don't you know me? But she backed away, and it seemed to the prince that her steps were as flowing as an animal's, and that she even lowered her head in the way of a goat or a deer. He said, I'm Lear. The old woman, said the Lady Amalthea. The moon went out. Ah, she shivered once, and then her eyes recognized him. But all her body was still wild and watchful, and she came no nearer to him. You were dreaming, my lady, he said, finding knightly speech again. I would that I might know your dream. I've dreamed it before, she answered slowly. I was in a cage, and there were others, beasts in cages, and an old woman. But I will not trouble you, my lord prince. I have dreamed it many times before. She would have left him then, but he spoke to her in a voice that only heroes have. As many animals develop a certain call when they become mothers. A dream that returns so often is like to be a messenger, come to warn you of the future, or to remind you of things untimely forgotten. Say more of this, if you will, and I will try to riddle it for you. Thereupon she halted, looking at him with her head a little turned, still with the air of some slim-furred creature peering out of a thicket. but her eyes held a human look of loss, as though she had missed something she needed, or suddenly realized she had never had it. If he had even blinked, she would have been gone. But he did not blink, and he held her, as he had learned to hold griffins and chimeras motionless with his steady gaze. Her bare feet wound him deeper than any tusk or riveting talon ever had, but he was a true hero. I gotta be right back. This has never happened on stream before, but I just heard my cat throw up, and I gotta go clean that, I guess, so, give me, like, 5 minutes, so, yeah. Let me just turn this off real quick. Okay, I'll be back in, like, 5 minutes. Oh gosh, that's embarrassing. Okay, so that's done. Oh, that's a first. But anyways, I return. Okay, let me take another sip real quick. Okay, anyways, back to this. Okay, where were we? Okay, yeah, okay. Got it. The Lady Amalthea said, in the dream there are black barred wagons, and the beasts that are and are not, and a winged being that clangs like metal in the moonlight. The tall man had green eyes and bloody hands. The tall man must be your uncle, the magician, Prince Lear mused. That part's clear enough. Anyway, and the bloody hands don't surprise me. I never cared much for his looks, if you'll pardon my saying so. Is that all the dream? I cannot tell you all of it, she said. It is never finished. Fear came back to her eyes like a great stone falling into a pool. All was clouded and swirling, and quick shadows were rushing everywhere. She said, I am running away from a good place where I was safe, and the night is burning around me. But it is day too, and I am walking under beech trees in the warm, sour rain, and there are butterflies, and a honey sound, and dappled roads, and towns like fish bones, and the flying thing is killing the old woman. I am running and running into the freezing fire however I turn, and my legs are the legs of a beast. Lady, Prince Lear broke in. My lady, by your leave, no more. Her dream was darkening into shape between them, and suddenly he did not want to know what it meant. No more, he said. But I must go on, said the Lady Amalthea, for it is never finished. Even when I wake, I cannot tell what is real, and what I am dreaming as I move and speak and eat my dinner. I remember what cannot have happened, and forget something that is happening to me now. People look at me as though I should know them, and I do know them in the dream, and always the fire draws near though I am awake. No more, he said desperately. A witch built this castle, and to speak of nightmares here often makes them come true. It was not her dream that chilled him, but that she did not weep as she told it. As a hero, he understood weeping women and always knew how to make them stop crying. Generally, you killed something. but her calm terror confused and unmanned him, while the shape of her face crumbled the distant dignity he had been so pleased at maintaining. When he spoke again, his voice was young and stumbling. Let me take another sip. I would court you with more grace, he said, if I knew how. My dragons and my feats of arms weary you, but they are all I have to offer. I haven't been a hero for very long, and before I was a hero I was nothing at all. Nothing but my father's dull, soft son. Perhaps I am only dull in a new way now, but I am here, and it is wrong of you to let me go to waste. I wish you wanted something of me. It wouldn't have to be a valiant deed, just useful. Then the Lady Amalthea smiled at him for the first time since she had come to stay in King Haggard's castle. It was a small smile, like the new moon, a slender bend of brightness on the edge of the unseen. But Prince Lear leaned toward it to be warm. He would have kept his hands around her smile and breathed it brighter if he had dared. Sing to me, she said, though it be valiant. To raise your voice in this dark, lonely place, and it will be useful as well. Sing to me, sing loudly. Drown out my dreams, keep me from remembering whatever wants me to remember it. Sing to me, my lord prince, if it please you. It may not seem a hero's task, but I would be glad of it. So Prince Lear sang out lustily, there on the cold stairway, and many damp, unseen creatures went flopping and scurrying for cover before the daylight gaiety of his voice. He sang the first words that came to him, and they were these. When I was a young man and very well thought of, I couldn't ask aught that the ladies denied. I nibbled their hearts like a handful of raisins, and I never spoke love, but I knew that I lied. But I said to myself, ah, they none of them know the secret I shelter and savor and save. I wait for the one who will see through my seeming, and I'll know when I love by the way I behave. The years drifted over the clouds and the heavens. The ladies went by me like snow on the wind. I charmed and I cheated, deceived and dissembled, and I sinned and I sinned and I sinned and I sinned. But I said to myself, ah, they none of them see. There's part of me pure as the whisk of a wave. My lady is late, but she'll find I've been faithful. And I'll know what I love, and I'll know when I love by the way I behave. At last came a lady both tender and... At last came a lady both knowing and tender, saying, you're not at all what they take you to be. I betrayed her before she had quite finished speaking, and she swallowed cold poison and jumped in the sea. And I say to myself when there's time for a word, as I gracefully grow more debauched and depraved, ah, love may be strong, but a habit is stronger, and I know when I loved by the way I behaved. The Lady Amalthea laughed when he was done, and that sound seemed to set the old darkness of the castle hissing back from them both. That was useful, she said. Thank you, my lord. I don't know why I sang that one, Prince Lear said awkwardly. One of my father's men used to sing it to me. I don't really believe it. I think that love is stronger than habits or circumstances. I think it is possible to keep yourself for someone for a long time and still remember why you were waiting when she comes at last. The Lady Amalthea smiled again, but she did not answer, and the prince took a single step closer to her. I'm gonna take another step. I guess I'm just a little bit rusty on my public speaking because it's like been a minute, but I've been stumbling a lot tonight. Oh, that's very nice. Loud motorcycle at like 7:30. Marveling at his own boldness, he said softly, I would enter your sleep if I could, and guard you there, and slay the thing that hounds you, as I would if it had the courage to face me in fair daylight. But I cannot come in unless you dream of me. Before she could speak, if she meant to, They heard footsteps below them on the winding stair, and King Haggard's veiled voice saying, "I heard him singing. What business has he to be singing?" Then Schmendrick the royal guard, his own voice meek and hurried, "Sire, it was but some heroic lay, some chanson de geste, or jest, such as he often sings when he rides out to glory, or rides home to renown. But be assured, your majesty, he never sings here," the king said. "He sings continuously on his fool's wanderings, I am sure, because that is what heroes do. But he was singing here, and not of battle and gallantry either, but of love. Where is she? I knew he was singing of love before I even heard him, for the very stones shuddered as they do when the bull moves in the earth. Where is she?" The prince and the Lady Amalthea looked at each other in the darkness, and in that moment they were side by side, though neither moved. With this came fear of the king, for whatever had been born between them, it might be something he wanted. A landing above them gave onto a corridor. They turned and ran together, though they could not see beyond their breaths. Her feet were as silent as the promise she had given him, but his own heavy boots rang exactly like the boots on the stone floor. His boots rang exactly like boots on the stone floor. King Haggard made no pursuit, but his voice rustled down the hallway after them, whispering under the magician's word. "Mice, my lord, beyond a doubt. Fortunately, I am possessed of a singular spell." "Let them run," the king said. "It suits me well that they should run." When they stopped running, wherever they stopped, they looked at each other again. Okay, another sip. Ahem. So the winter whined and crept along, not toward any spring, but toward the brief, devouring summer of King Haggard's country. Life in the castle went on in the silence that fills a place where no one hopes for anything. Molly Grew cooked and laundered, scrubbed stone, mended armor, and sharpened swords. She chopped wood, milled flour, groomed horses, and cleaned their stalls, melted down stolen gold and silver for the king's coffers, and made bricks without straw. And in the evenings before she went to bed, she usually read over Prince Lear's new poems to the Lady Amalthea, and praised them, and corrected the spelling. Ahem. Let me just... Yeah, I feel like my voice is real rusty tonight. Schmendrick fooled and juggled and flim-flammed as the king bade him, hating it, knowing that Haggard knew he hated it, and took his pleasure thereby. He never again suggested to Molly that they escape from the castle before Haggard made sure of the truth of the truth of the Lady Amalthea. But he no longer sought to discover the secret way down to the Red Bull, even when he was allowed time to himself. He seemed to have surrendered not to the king, but to some far older, crueler enemy that had caught up with him at last, this winter in this place. The Lady Amalthea grew as much more beautiful every day, as that day was grimmer and gloomier than the one before. The old men-at-arms, coming down drenched and shivering from walking their posts in the rain, or in from stealing things for the king, opened as quietly as flowers when they met her on the stairs or in the hallways. She would smile at them and speak gently. But when she had passed by, the castle always seemed darker than ever, and the wind outside would rattle the thick sky like a sheet on a clothesline. For her beauty was human and doomed, and there was no comfort in it for old men. They could only draw their dripping cloaks higher and limp on down to the small fire in the scullery. Ahem. Ahem. I don't know why I really feel like it's just like time. I took too much time off and now I'm like all rusty again. But I'm getting back in the saddle, I guess. But the Lady Amalthea and Prince Lear walked and spoke and sang together as blithely as though King Hagrid's castle had become a green wood, wild and shadowy with spring. They climbed the crooked towers like hills, picnicking in stone meadows under a stone sky, and splashed up and down stairways that had softened and quickened into streams. He told her everything he knew, and what he thought about all of it, and happily invented a life and opinions for her, which she helped him do by listening. Nor was she deceiving him, for she truly remembered nothing before the castle and him. She began and ended with Prince Lear, except for the dreams, and they soon faded, as he said they would. They seldom heard the hunting roar of the Red Bull at night anymore, but when the hungering sound came to her ears, then she would be frightened, and the walls in the winter would grow up around them again, as though their spring were all of her making, her joy's gift to the prince. He would have held her at such times, but he had long known her dread of being touched. One afternoon the Lady Amalthea stood on the highest tower of the castle, watching for Prince Lear's return from an expedition against a brother-in-law of the ogre he had slain. For he still went out on occasional errantries, as he had told Molly he might. The sky was piled up over the valley of Hagsgate, the color of dirty soap, but it was not raining. Far below, the sea slid out the sea slid out toward the smoky horizon in hard bands of silver and green and kelpy brown. The ugly birds were restless. They flew out often, 2 and 3 together, circled swiftly. Yeah, I got scared. Thank you. I mean, thank you for the follow as always, but it always scares me. What's your name? Well, that's a lot of numbers. That's a big old name. I can't even really read that or like pronounce that, but like thank you. All the same, much appreciated. The ugly birds were restless. They flew out often, 2 and 3 together, circled swiftly over the water, and then returned to strut on the sand, chortling and cocking their heads at King Hagrid's castle on the cliff. Said so, said so. The tide was low and near to turning. The Lady Amalthea began to sing, and her voice balanced and hovered in the slow, cold air like another sort of bird. I am a king's daughter, and I grow old within, the prison of my person, the shackles of my skin. And I would run away and beg from door to door. She did not remember having heard the song before, but the words pinched and plucked at her like children, trying to drag her back to some place that they wanted to see again. She moved her shoulders to get away from them. But I am not old, she said to herself, and I am no prisoner. Oh gosh, what? That's such a long name. All I can read is Plain Guy. Thank you. Henceforth you will now be dubbed Plain Guy. Thank you, Plain Guy, for the follow. Much appreciated. But I am not old, she said to herself, and I am no prisoner. I am the Lady Amalthea, beloved of Lear, who has come into my dreams so that I may not doubt myself even while I sleep. Where could I have learned a song of sorrow? I am the Lady Amalthea, and I only know the songs that Prince Lear has taught me. She lifted a hand to touch the mark on her forehead. The sea wheeled by, calm as the zodiac, and the ugly birds screamed. It doubted her a little that the mark would not go away, or it troubled her a little that the mark would not go away. Your Majesty, she said, though there had been no sound. She heard the rustling chuckle at her back, and turned to see the king. He wore a grey cloak over his mail, but his head was bare. The black lines on his face showed where the fingernails of age had skidded down the hard skin, but he looked stronger than his son, and wilder. You are quick for what you are, he said, but slow, I think, for what you were. It is said that love makes men swift and women slow. It will catch you at last if you love much more. She smiled at him without replying. She never knew what to say to the pale-eyed old man whom she so rarely saw, except as a movement on the edge of the solitude that she shared with Prince Lear. Then armor winked deep in the valley, and she heard the scrape of a weary horse stumbling on a stone. "Your son is coming home," she said. "Let us watch him together." King Haggard came slowly to stand beside her at the parapet, but he gave no more than a glance to the tiny glinting figure riding home. "Nay, what concern have you or I with Lear truly?" he said. "He's none of mine, either by birth or belonging. I picked him up where someone else had set him down, thinking that I'd never been happy and never had a son. It was pleasant enough at first, but it died quickly. All things die when I pick them up. I do not know why they die, but it has always been so, save for one dear possession that has not turned cold and dull as I guarded it, the only thing that has ever belonged to me." His grim face gave the sudden starved leap of a sprung trap. "And Lear will be no help to you in finding it," he said. "He has never even known what it is." Without warning, the whole castle sang like a plucked string as the beast asleep at its roots shifted his dire weight. The Lady Amalthea caught her balance easily, being well used to this, and said lightly, "The Red Bull. But why do you think I have come to steal the bull? I have no kingdom to keep, and no wish for conquest. What would I do with him? How much does he eat?" "Do not mock me," the king answered. "The Red Bull is no more mine than the boy is, and he does not eat, and cannot be stolen. He serves anyone who has no fear, and I have no more fear than I have rest." Yet the Lady Amalthea saw foreboding sliding over the long gray face, scuttling in the shadows of brows and bones. "Do not mock me," he said. Why will you play that you have forgotten your quest, and that I am to remind you of it? I know what you have come for, and you know very well that I have it. Take it then, take it if you can, but do not dare to surrender now." The black wrinkles were all on edge like knives. Okay, let me take another sip. Prince Lear was singing as he rode, though the Lady Amalthea could not yet hear the words. She said quietly to the king, "My lord, in all your castle, and all your realm, and all the kingdoms that the Red Bull may bring you, there is only one thing I desire, and you have just told me that he is not yours to give or to keep. Whatever it is you treasure that is not he, I truly wish you joy of it. Good day, your majesty." She moved towards the tower stairway, but he stood in her way and she paused, looking at him with her eyes as dark as hoof prints in snow. The Grey King smiled, and a strange kindness for him chilled her for an instant, for she suddenly fancied that they were somehow alike. But then he said, "I know you. I almost knew you as soon as I saw you on the road, coming to my door with your cook and your clown. Since then there is no movement of yours that has not betrayed you. A pace, a glance, a turn of the head, the flash of your throat as you breathe, even your way of standing perfectly still. They were all my spies. You've made me wonder for a little while, and in my own way I am grateful. But your time is done." He looked seaward over his shoulder, and suddenly stepped to the parapet with the thoughtless grace of a young man. "The tide is turning," he said. "Come and see it. Come here." He spoke very softly, but his voice suddenly held the crying of the ugly birds on the shore. "Come here," he said fiercely. "Come here, I won't touch you." Prince Lear sang, "I will love you as long as I can, however long that may be." The horrible head on his saddle was harmonizing in a kind of bass falsetto. The Lady Amalthea went to stand with the king. The waves were coming in under the thick swirling sky, growing as slowly as trees as they bulged across the sea. They crouched as they neared the shore, arching their backs higher and higher, and then sprang up to the beach as furiously as trapped animals bounding at a wall and falling back with a sobbing snarl to leap again and again, claws caked and breaking, while the ugly birds yelled mournfully. The waves were gray and green as pigeons until they broke, and then they were the color of the hair that blew across her eyes. Let me take another sip. Big night for sips tonight. There, a strange high voice said close to her. There they are. King Haggard was grinning at her and pointing down to the white water. There they are, he said, laughing like a frightened child. There they are. Say that they are not your people. Say that you did not come here searching for them. Say now that you've stayed all winter in my castle for love. He could not wait for her answer, but turned away to look at the waves. His face was changed beyond believing, delight coloring the somber skin, rounding over the cheekbones and loosening the bowstring mouth. They are mine, he said softly. They belong to me. The Red Bull gathered them for me one at a time, and I bade him drive each one into the sea. What better place could there be to keep unicorns, and what other cage could hold them? For the bull keeps guard over them, awake or asleep, and he daunted their hearts long ago. Now they live in the sea, and every tide still carries them within an easy step of the land. But they dare not take that step. They dare not come out of the water. They are afraid of the Red Bull. Nearby, Prince Lear sang, others may offer more than they can give, all that they have for as long as they live. The Lady Amalthea closed her hands on the parapet and wished for him to come to her, for she knew now that King Haggard was mad. Below them lay the thin, sallow beach, and the rocks and the rising tide, and nothing more. I like to watch them. They fill me with joy. The childish voice was all but singing. I am sure it is joy. The first time I felt it, I thought I was going to die. There were two of them in the early morning shadows. One was drinking from a stream, and the other was resting her head on his back. I thought I was going to die. I said to the Red Bull, I must have that. I must have all of it, all there is, for my need is very great. So the bull caught them one by one. It was all the same to the bull. It would have been the same if I had demanded tumblebugs or crocodiles. He can only tell the difference between what I want and what I do not want. He had forgotten her for the moment as he leaned over the low wall, as she might have fled the tower then. But she stayed where she was, for an old bad dream was waking all around her, though it was daylight. The tide shattered on the rocks and tumbled together again, and Prince Lear rode along singing, But I will love you as long as I can, and never ask if you love me. I suppose I was young when I first saw them, King Haggard said. Now I must be old. At least I have picked many more things up than I had then, and put them all down again. But I always knew that nothing was worth the investment of my art, because nothing lasts, and I was right, and so I was always old. Yet each time I see my unicorns, it is like that morning in the woods, and I'm truly young in spite of myself, and anything can happen in a world that holds such beauty. In the dream, I looked down at 4 white legs and felt the earth under split hoofs. There was a burning in my brow as there is now, but there were no unicorns coming in on the tide. The king is mad. He said, I wonder what will become of them when I am gone. The Red Bull will forget them immediately, I know, and be off to find a new master. But I wonder if they will take their freedom even then. I hope not, for then they will belong to me forever. Then he turned to look at her again, and his eyes were as gentle and greedy as Prince Lear's eyes became when he looked at her. You are the last, he said. The bull missed you because you were shaped like a woman, but I always knew. How did you manage the change, by the way? Your magician couldn't have done it. I don't think he could turn cream into butter. If she'd let go of the parapet, she would have fallen, but she answered him quite calmly. My lord, I do not understand. I see nothing at all in the water. The king's face shivered as though she were looking at him through fire. Do you still deny yourself? He whispered. Do you dare deny yourself? Nay, that's as false and cowardly as though you were truly human. I'll hurl you down to your folk with my own hands if you deny yourself. He took a step toward her, and she watched him with her eyes open, unable to move. The tumult of the sea filled her head, together with Prince Lear's singing and the blubbering death wail of the man named Rook. King Haggard's grey face hung over her like a hammer, muttering, It must be so, I cannot be mistaken. Yet her eyes are as stupid as his, as any eyes that never saw unicorns, never saw anything but themselves in a glass. What cheat is this? How can it be? There are no green leaves in her eyes now. Then she did close her eyes, but she shut in more than she kept out. The bronze-winged creature with a hag's face swung by, laughing and prattling, and the butterfly folded its wings to strike. The Red Bull moved silently through the forest, pushing the bare branches aside with his pale horns. She knew when King Haggard went away, but she did not open her eyes. It was long after, or only a little while after, that she heard the magician's voice behind her. Be still, it's over. She had not known that she was making any sound. In the sea, he said. In the sea. Well, don't feel too bad about it. I didn't see them either. Not this time or any other that I've stood here and watched the tide coming in. But he saw them. And if Haggard sees something, it's there. He laughed with a sound like an axe falling on wood. Don't feel bad. This is a witch castle, and it's hard to look closely at things living here. It's not enough to be ready to see. You have to be looking all the time. He laughed again, more gently. All right, he said. We'll find them now. Come on, come with me. She turned to him, moving her mouth to make words, but no words came out. The magician was studying her face with his green eyes. Your face is wet, he said worriedly. I hope that's spray. If you've become human enough to cry, there is no magic in the world. Oh, it must be spray. Come with me. It better be spray. And with that, we're on to chapter 12. Wait, did I do this right? Did I accidentally read another? I don't think I did. Okay, yeah. Because it's 12, then 13, then 14, so that's also 3. I for a second there I thought I like read too far. So that's a thing. But no, we're pretty much in the same spot we're supposed to be at this point. Excusey. But yeah, that's gonna be it. I don't think I really have much else to say here. I guess gonna have the oh, I'm so rusty at this. It's been so long. Ugh. I mean, we're gonna like, what do I even say? Yeah. So, new schedule tomorrow. That's gonna be up on the Twitters. I don't think it's really gonna be that worth it to plug my Twitters and stuff. But I will do that regardless. So that's the thing. If you're so inclined, if anyone is like unfamiliar here with my stuff. So new schedule coming tomorrow. Wait, yeah, tomorrow. I forgot what day it was for some reason. New event, big event happening on Saturday. A new model upgrade rollout happening. Everyone's gonna see it in motion finally. Very excited, but also very scared. So that's a thing. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me today. I hope everyone had a good time, even though I'm very rusty at my reading right now. Hopefully I'll get better again as time goes on. But yeah, that's gonna be it for me. So hope you have a good morning, evening, afternoon, night, whatever it is, wherever you are. And I love you. Mwah!